Hi there, I'm Judith. This is Brekkie. I started this channel because I own a little house and I love to talk about it. Those of you who've seen my story know that I got this little house after having a very humble income and very few resources in the bank. So what happened when I found out I could get a house? You might be surprised to know that I absorbed myself with the complexities of what color formica I would like in my kitchen. I know that sounds very funny, but that's what happened. And I want to talk about that today. Some of the processing we go through as we're making housing decisions, what some of the challenges are, the compromises, and how they might impact seniors in particular. Many years ago now, I suddenly lost my ability to write, as in with my hand on a pen. Up to that point, I had been writing several hours a day. It was how I communicated with the world. Now I do more orally, but in those days, that's how I made sense of the universe around me. And yes, one day I woke up and I was no longer able to perform that act. My brain had rewired me somehow, so it couldn't happen. And it gave me a terrible tremor when I tried. I was in a panic, and it would be 6 months before I could even get in with a neurologist. I felt like I needed to get this figured out now. Yes, now. Because writing seemed like my whole world. Strangely, I learned to do without. I never imagined I could do without that facility. Perhaps 50 years ago, before I knew how to use a computer, that would have been a really big problem. But I was able to adapt and change and find new ways to write. It's now years and years later. It wasn't something anyone could fix. It was a kind of overuse syndrome that does that. It happens to opera singers, piano players. Suddenly the thing won't happen. But I don't miss it day to day. Here's the thing. As seniors, we lose so much. We lose friends, we lose family, people who are dear to us. We lose homes, things, places, memories, abilities. And maybe the first instinct is to grab onto stuff and not let it go. But here are some examples of how that can impact housing decisions. I've been speaking lately quite a bit in a humorous vein, but my commentary really reflects a serious reality about tiny homes. Now, I think tiny homes could be designed purpose-built for seniors. It's just they aren't. To my mind, this is the kind of thing that happens. Back in the day, tiny homes were mostly about younger people. And younger people, they don't have a lot of stuff. This matters when it comes to tiny homes. Because what are we seeing? We're seeing tiny home manufacturers take a tiny home and then match it to a senior. And the way they're matching has to do with accommodating their stuff. It doesn't have to do with accommodating specifically senior needs. It becomes about nooks and crannies of where to store things, how many things you can fit into one spot. But to my mind, that's a very problematic way to go about designing homes that are specifically for seniors. If it wasn't about the stuff, what would the home look like? That's what I'm trying to say here. It's a matter of weighing the priorities between stuff and living situation that I don't think is a very good match right now in the tiny home industry. What has happened is our stuff is manipulating our housing choices like a tail wagging the dog. I feel seniors are in this kind of sandbox as we consider housing for ourselves as we get older. It's very hard to distinguish between what our needs might be and what our stuff says our needs might be. And if not our stuff, some other minor detail. The example I used was my formica. And you know, the stupid formica, it took me a year to decide the color. And I went online to get advice. That's how crazy this is. Sure, the color mattered to me, but was it necessary in this whole scheme? Hell no. The second area I want to bring up, in the decision-making process around housing, it can become very easy to limit your choices up front about what kind of a home you'd like. If you've seen my Q&A video where I answer quickly some of the questions I get asked as an owner of this house, you'll see that one of the most common is that people have comments about my roof. And what do they say about my roof? Oh, my wife wouldn't like it. In fact, in this area, just recently, an affordable housing company wanted to install affordable housing with solar on the roof. That organization had to forego doing solar and having all the utility bills paid because the community insisted on gables. I'm using this as an example. You can tell it gets my steam up. But as you're looking for affordable housing, I recommend you keep your mind open about what that could be. You might discover something you never imagined. There are many, many, many different kinds of housing out there. Until recently, I could never imagine myself living in a trailer. But now I watch those real estate tours of trailers in trailer parks in Arizona, and I totally could do that. No problem living in one of those trailers. I could make one of those my home. Would it meet my other goals? No. I don't want to pay lot rent. But as far as making the home a home, sure. It might be possible that you can't find affordable housing in the area you actually want to live. You might have to change around your notions a little bit about what you'd be willing to do there. Personally, I don't want to be living in this area, but I'm never leaving. I have a house here. It wasn't an option to live where I wanted to live. But I'm living here because I have a home here, and it's mine, and I can afford it. And the third topic I want to take up is how tempting it is to get fastened onto a concept, an ideal, something you hear about, and have it take you off track from what you really actually want to have happen. A few years back, when we had kind of a housing crisis and teachers, they were never getting paid enough, and then it was also difficult for them to find housing so they could work in certain areas of the country. So some school districts started to offer programs to help them get houses. And one particular story I remember very well. That district had a shared equity program. I think most people don't know what a shared equity program is. Basically, and you'll have to ask an expert to tell you exactly, an organization fronts you the money for a down payment. In return for fronting you the money, they share the equity in your house, which means when you come to sell it, you don't get all the equity. The equity would be the difference between the price you bought it and the price you sell it. And of course, in certain situations, that could be a huge amount. It's all about timing. It could be a zero amount in certain years. So this one couple was being interviewed, and she was a teacher, and she had been offered the shared equity program. They were living in a rental, they had a couple kids, and rents were very expensive. They were having trouble scraping together money for a down payment. They turned down the shared equity program. Why did they turn it down? They wanted all the equity. They wanted all the equity because they wanted to leave something for their kids. They were very much attached to that vision of themselves as parents, what they needed to leave for their kids, how they should provide. But think about this a moment. In being attached to that, to my belief, they missed the objective. Let's add some math. Supposing their rent was $2,000 a month. I'm on purpose using round numbers for ease. And a house with the shared equity, perhaps their mortgage payment was a bit less than that, but they'd have to pay for maintenance, that kind of thing. Let's give their house $1,500 for a mortgage. Which would you pick? $1,500 for the mortgage, the money for a down payment, and only a share of the equity, you don't end up with all the equity, or $2,000 rent and you keep going with the rental until you can save up enough money for a full down payment. 3 years later, yep, the rents go up. So maybe it's now $2,500, $3,000. You have your home, you're paying $1,500, your mortgage is steady, it's going to be steady for the lifetime of the mortgage, it's never going up. Sure, you pay a bit more for maintenance, but the difference between your mortgage and the rental costs, you can stash that away and give yourself a kitty. Rents go up and up and up. You're still sitting there with $1.5K for your mortgage. It's not going anywhere. Sure, you won't get equity, but you're paying a whole lot less for your housing than you would if you stayed in a rental. And who knows if it would ever be an advantage to their children if they got all that equity. I think many kids would much prefer their parents to be less anxiety-ridden about money and to have a home they could all share and enjoy. So this is an example where attachment to a certain goal or a certain particular was a distraction in the process of choosing a home. All the money they saved in rent, they could have invested it. I found their decision-making very odd. There's got to be a reason it's stuck in my brain. But I'm not sure many of us don't go through this in one form or another. We'll get attached to one thing and forget the bigger picture, or forget what we're really aiming for. But don't ask me how not to do that. I think this is the problem with downsizing. It's very difficult to go through that process. The message I take from that story is to be open to other models of doing things. Yes, get professional advice about whether something is a good option or a bad option. But there may be possibilities in the financing realm that you might not have thought of, that you didn't know existed, that just might be off your horizon somewhere, but may just get you a house. Seniors have to navigate so often the tension between losing things, grabbing hold of them so you don't lose them, and freely letting go so you can have more space for new ideas in your life, a new paradigm, a different way to live. So as we make housing decisions, I think we need to keep that in mind and double down to figure out what we really need, what we really, really need of the things we have and the things we don't have yet. That's enough for me for now. We'll talk soon, all right? See you then.